And my mic is hot. Yeah, they should be able to hear us in the audience. And alrighty, here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, lady and gentlemen. There's probably like one woman in the audience, so it's either Lisa or Trisha. It could be Christy, but one of those three is probably in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I have with me not just Marco. I thought it was Marco Iodice. Is the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was just Marco Iodice, but I actually have with me as well Ilya Vorobiev and Marcin Is it Guki?
Gutsky. It's pronounced Gutsky.
Thank you. So we keep the record straight. Okay, we get it right the first time, and then we don't have to worry about me slaughtering your names with the American pronunciation down the line. So we have the majority of the above the line team from Leonardo Render. Guys, what a treat. Thank you so much for making time for the show. All three of you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we have in the audience, we have the live audience is growing, and of course we'll be republishing to BitTube. So big shout out to the BitTube team for monetizing the platform and making it an option for us. It's kind of nice to see progress in that space. But we have a live audience that is very much dominated by either developers or miners, people who are heavily invested in the infrastructure of GPU mining especially. And then the algorithms that are used for GPU mining, but also the infrastructure that many of us are hoping would lend itself to top bounties with distributed rendering. So just to kind of frame who's in the audience today, that's who's watching.
Great.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
Audience.
I love this audience. I mean, I feel like I have the best community in the world as far as distributed render and blockchain. I really do. And they ask very great questions, relevant questions, and we're all interested in the same thing, furthering the state of the art and the technology so we can all do better work and hopefully earn more money from it.
Yeah.
So awesome. If you wouldn't mind, really briefly, for the benefit of the audience, they may not know the roster. They may not know why each member of the team is here on the live stream. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and letting us know what your role is at Leonardo Render, that would be very helpful.
Okay. We are here, three members of Leonardo Render, and I would say each member of Leonardo is a key member because as a startup, each one of us is doing our best to optimize what's the role and be as helpful as possible. But I think for the benefit of this interview, we have Marcin Gutsky, which is the guy who developed our software from zero till now and still developing, which is also the core of Leonardo Render. And we have Ilya, which is our strategist and analyst, who is representing the token and ICO and blockchain side of our project. And then we have me. I don't need really to talk much because those two guys do all the work.
Well, definitely appreciate you being on the live stream anyhow, Marco. It's very important, especially when we're moving into this these alternate compute bounties. Very important for there to be a face to the company. And it sounds bad, but somebody to take the bullets when they come flying towards the team, right?
Yeah, so, that's me.
So appreciate all three of you being on the live stream. So let's do this. I've got a lot of comments coming in through the comments section. Guys, thanks so much for lining up your relevant questions for the Leonardo Render team. Hey, Osiris Twits, just really brief shout out for a couple of key community members who always make the live streams really great. But Osiris Twits, BDF, Terry B, seeing you there, Faded, all of our moderators who jumped in. Brand new moderator, thank you so much, Reynaldo. He jumped in first. With my community, if somebody says first, I make them a moderator.
Okay.
They get a job if they're first. They don't. So the bragging rights are having a job to do on the live stream. So awesome. Let's start a little bit then with the beginnings of the project. When did you guys first see a problem that you felt was worthy of solving?
So I was studying 3D design and motion graphic because I saw the potential. I mean, I was not so visionary because it's so clear that it's the future. And my progress were driven by my will of learning. When you love to learn something new. But then one of the key things of designing and making things on the screen is see the result. And watching the result was so incredibly long lasting. I mean, you have to really wait. People who make renderings know that even if it's a simple, really simple image, really simple shape, you gotta wait at least, a few minutes, which is in the speed of the word and the speed of the production is going so fast that you cannot wait even 2 minutes. But 2 minutes is just the cube, just the sample cube of the application. But when it comes to serious things, you gotta wait days. And
right.
Yeah,
if I can interject, I feel your pain there. When I worked at DreamWorks Animation, the animators, there was an entire game room made just for animators, where they had a racing simulator, they had a ping pong table, they had snacks, they had a refrigerator, they had a lounge, they had all kinds of activities, board games, everything, because the animators would hit render, even just a play blast, because their scenes were so complex that if they wanted to get a preview of a few seconds, they would be out half the day.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, I was working in Singapore in a company called Gray's, an advertising agency, and we were working with big companies. And what we were doing, can I say brand names here? Right. No
yes,
problem, right?
That depends on where Leonardo Render is in terms of legality, guys.
No, it's just my ex-client. I was one of my clients, but it was Qatar Airways. And we were basically making this model of this airplane, just flying above the clouds, and all of a sudden, turning, and then the brand was coming out. Apparently, very simple scene. The problem was we knew that render would take probably, let's say, 48 hours to finish the entire, because it was one take. But the real pain was, the painting, the logo on the airplane, the clouds, the simulation, and you don't really know what's going on until the end of the render. You can do like the low res, and it is faster. But then when you have to watch the entire thing, you have to wait, even for refinement. So it's not the final render, but even it's the workflow. Oh, let's make it a little bit, darker. Or that slide is bouncing here, or the cloud, it doesn't look so real. And every time, every little comment from the creative director was at least 4 to 6 hours to see the final result. So I wasn't really thinking about a solution. I just want probably a garage full of GPUs just for me. And I said, that's what I want. I want, a warehouse full of GPUs. And then, of course, it's impossible because it's expensive, because of the power consumption, because of the heat, and all the things that we all know about GPUs. But then I met a guy. I was in the swimming pool, and I was playing with my son. And then all of a sudden, I met this guy who was a miner. And honestly, it was the first time I heard the word mining, not connected to gold mining or normal mining. So he said, I have this many GPUs. And I said, how many you have? And it was like a lot of GPUs. And I said, have you ever thinking about making renderings out of GPUs? And he said, render what? And I said, okay, I think we should have a beer. And
yeah, he had no idea what GPUs were created for in the first place, did he?
Exactly. So GPU just make Ethereum. That's what they do, right? I said, not really. I mean, the G of GPU is a graphic, but then it's okay. And then, we said it was I don't want to say that we were just playing with the idea, but we were just, imagine how it could be to connect people who need renderings to his facility. And then so I started researching and thinking how to connect these people, because we have the demand and then we have the offer. Then let's make something in the middle that can connect these two guys and make it in a very simple, inexpensive, and let's say fun way. Just my point was, let's try to do something that doesn't really change the workflow of creators. Because I know how complex are 3D applications and rendering engines. So I said, I don't want to change this flow, because these guys are so automated that, putting something right in the middle, a new software that changed completely, or working in remote, and that slowly we start thinking how this could look like. And my dream was the single button application that everybody wants. And basically that's what we've done. So just one button and go.
Okay, that's phenomenal. That is absolutely phenomenal. And I hear you. As far as understanding, sounds like first off, if I can summarize your story, you had an itch that you wanted to scratch in terms of rendering and reclaiming some of your time. You saw somebody that had one piece of the solution with this giant render farm, or what you saw was a render farm. You thought, okay, that's a render farm. That shouldn't just be for mining. And then you thought, okay, well, somebody can innovate in this space. So that's great. And then in terms of the pain of changing some of the workflows, I hear you. There are software packages that they're complex enough. So making them any more complex by having to create a whole new world full of scripts and plugins and APIs, that's a little bit painful. I mean, frankly, it seems like with rendering, though, for many years there have already been some fairly simple ways to tie into the major software packages. If I can ask really briefly, which software packages were you most familiar with, and which ones did you think, okay, this is the perfect candidate for a distributed render system?
I started with at the very beginning with SketchUp and Blender. SketchUp was literally to present the project to the client without anything, and then Blender for more complex scenes. Just because the company didn't want to, at the beginning, the agency didn't want to invest in a large number of users software. So let's say if you want to buy, let's say, 3ds Max or any other software, you have to invest quite a bit. And then Blender was for free. So let's try how it works. And then just in case we go to a more super high professional software from Autodesk so I was very familiar with Blender and Cycles. So start rendering with that rendering engine was fantastic because, ray tracing and bouncing, and the final result was fantastic. And then the fact that it was working on GPU. So my favorite software is Blender, but I can also use Maya and 3ds Max. And recently I was playing around with other new kids on the block, but I cannot say the name.
Oh, got it. Fair enough. No, I hear you. So disclosure, I've done consulting for a company called Metapipe that did virtual workstations. And so I'm familiar with the pain of trying to be awarded contracts to work with some kind of either cloud render or cloud desktop licensing of some of these software packages. And it can be really tricky. You can never tell what they're working on in the meantime, while you're attempting to create a solution that makes sense, but they're thinking like, yeah, that makes sense to us too. And we have like $15 million over here that we can pull into development. So yeah, totally appreciate the need for discretion. So let me ask, as far as identifying that problem and seeing that, especially working with Blender seems like a really good fit because you're not only free, you're open source, right? So you have all kinds of open source development and resources to work with. Seems like you have a community that may be supportive. Has the Blender community reached back out to you? The development community for Blender reached back out to you and said, this makes sense. We want to reciprocate some of the effort that you're putting in and put that into our open source development.
We just met Tom Rosendahl, which is the founder of Blender in Vancouver. So our head of strategy, Delon, just flew to Vancouver and met a bunch of guys. So the thing that we wanted feedbacks because we are a startup and we don't want to sell the thing. We want to say, guys, try this and kill it and let us know what's wrong with it. Because we are at that stage now. We are at a stage where, for me, it works perfectly, right? Because I know everything, but I want somebody who has a completely different angle. So you can use a 3D application 1,000 different ways. And for something that for me, it's perfectly working. For other people, say, look, I do animals and I have this fur or hair and dust everywhere, and that's not responding. So I'm not making animals. So for me, it works. For other people, it doesn't. So we met Ton, and he said, he asked us like 2 straight questions. And the first one was, is this guy faster than, having your own render farm? Simple question, because there is something in between. It's not just the button and the render process. There is also the upload and the distribution. And sure, we said,
if I may interject really briefly for the audience's benefit, they may not know technologically what is involved there, or they may not know what's involved by way of by way of scene sizes, by way of assets that may need to be transferred, because geometry shouldn't be too big a file, right? But textures and such. So characterize for us what that actually means in real world. If you had to get a scene or some project that you're working on locally out, as opposed to a local render farm.
So you mean the difference between making it on your computer or sending to a render farm?
Maybe just like what would be a typical scene size for, because I think many of the audience, there aren't as many graphic artists and as many 3D artists or CG practitioners in the audience as there are miners and blockchain enthusiasts. So what's the difference there? They're used to, for example, needing low latency internet to be able to work on blockchain, but not necessarily high bandwidth transfers.
Exactly. So usually, we try to tell all the story of the rendering, because we know that many people don't know. And then when they figure out, they say, "Oh my God, this is so good! I mean, that's rendering. I mean, that's Godzilla is rendering. Yeah, that's kind of So they sometimes, of course, they don't know that behind that beautiful movies there's the rendering. So the scene, an average. It's hard to say average scene, but if you draw a line in a 3D software, a line is made of a line and a couple of dots that we call vertices, and you make a square. Okay, that is just the geometry, and it's so small. It's really small because it's just data. It's nothing. If you make a very complex scene just with lines and dots and faces, it's still just geometry, and it's still very small. Even if it's a very large and complex scene, it's very small. We're talking about like probably less than 100 MB, probably. It's very small, but it's nothing. You want this to be beautiful, so you want to attach some skin to this geometry, and that's the texture. And then the texture is an image, is a PNG or JPEG or any other even high-res format, and that's when it comes to the weight of the file. And then there are simulation that gets a lot of CPU power to process, and many other elements, and that makes the scene growing. There are some Hollywood movie scenes that are
hair, cloth, water, etc.
Yeah, it's really can be really big. So there are some Hollywood movies, some just the scene, just the package of the scene that is probably more than 100 gigabytes. Probably a Pixar animation movie with the water and a couple of characters and the vegetation in the background and the sand and everything. It's so beautiful. It's huge. That's a huge file. Now, what happened to this big file is like, for Leonardo, is like transferring the file from me to Seth. And how long it takes to transfer 100 gigabytes, I don't know. It depends on the internet connection.
Yeah, I live in a Google Fiber market, so thankfully I have gigabit internet. But not everybody does, right?
Yeah, not everybody does. But also not everybody has 100 gigabytes to send every day. So probably, the truth sometimes falls in just right in the middle. Not in the middle between 0 and 100 gigabytes, because it's still a lot, 50 gigabytes. But let's say that 10 gigabytes, it's a fairly big scene. And it's like 10 movies. Sending to Seth, it will take probably, I don't know, less than an hour or so, hopefully less than an hour. And once the file is transferred, the client is not paying, nobody is paying, nobody is doing anything. We are not counting the hours. But when the file lands on the render farm, any render farm, that's from that moment, the rendering starts, depending on how fast you want it to be done. But then, the rendering starts on the render farm and then comes back to the client once it's rendered. Now, what happened between, in the rendering process for the render farms? Usually, the project gets reopened in another computer, and this computer is connected to different nodes of GPUs, and each GPU is processing a piece of the scene or a full frame of the animation, and then it gets wrapped again and sent back to the client. So that's usually what's going on in the render farms.
Got it. Can I ask a semi-technical question here? Not very technical, but as far as the project pipeline, as things are rendered on Leonardo Render, is it using a file server and then sending back a stream of images, or is everything being rendered locally and then sent back in bulk once the job is done?
So at the moment, it's sent back in bulk altogether.
Okay.
But in pipeline, we have the live view of what's going on. And this requires a dedicated server. If you want to know in depth how it is, we have Marcin here who can help us to explain how exactly it works.
Okay, I think I might be more curious only because for me, it's the sort of product that me and my brothers, we're 5 brothers, and 4 of us have worked in animation and visual effects. I was the oddball that's wanted to work in live action, so cinematography, and then also doing documentation of pipeline for the studios. So like for me, it's always like I'm curious because I'm curious. For them, it's like I'm curious because this could save me hours out of my day, possibly. Yeah. But that's yeah. I might be more interested in this question than maybe some of our audience. So I don't want to get too mired in questions about pipeline and workflow.
Okay, let me explain that. At the moment, we send entire file. It's packed in. It's sent to the miner. Then is unpacked and the rendering is going. After that, everything is back. But also, what can be interesting if you have a large project, we're going to introduce cache. To not sending all files once again, only the delta. What's changed from the last upload? Great. Yeah. So we also not using file network file system to store everything. We are using client. It's a specific system that do the rendering, receive files, and do the entire processing.
Okay, fantastic. Osiris says, "No, Seth, you need to educate us. This is right up your alley. This is your jam."
I was trying to do this right, but hopefully somebody understand that.
I think no, and I think Marcin, that helps tremendously to understand a little better what the workflow is for the miner's perspective, for somebody who may not be into the actual workflow of the artist that's sending the job. So that's very helpful. So yeah, Jolinator says, you can never be too technical on this show, Seth. Get more technical, more geeky. This is why I love this audience. I love this audience because we can talk about any side of it, the blockchain side. We can talk about the entertainment side, even the distribution. We can talk about the settlement layers, and they're interested in all of it because for them, they want to know. I mean, pretend like for a moment, this isn't actually a bunch of qualified investors. I can't say that publicly, but pretend like for a moment you were pitching to a room of qualified investors, but instead of giving you money, they're giving you maybe 5,000 GPUs, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? And we have audience members who have mid-scale operations of that size and maybe even greater. We don't. That's just it. It's like having more than 5 GPUs is like Fight Club. You don't talk about it. You don't talk about having more than 5,000 GPUs because then people show up to your door with, weapons. They want to borrow your GPUs. So just pretend like this audience. They want to see you succeed. They do, and so they're going to want to know everything. They're going to want to know all the little details. So. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for doing a little bit of a deeper dive there. As far as the specific problem that you knew you needed to solve first when jumping to Leonardo Render, Marco, you mentioned that you saw the pain point working with Blender. You just met the head of the Blender Foundation at SIGGRAPH, I imagine then?
Yes, exactly.
Hey, that's where everyone meets and greets. It makes sense. But you just met the head of Blender. Are there any other software packages or anybody from Autodesk, for example, or anywhere else that has said, hey, we like what you're doing and has asked for your time? Anything you can talk about publicly?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to close the SIGGRAPH thing, so we met on and he said, asked a couple of questions, and they were very simple question. It was really tough to respond because he said, is it faster than, and we said, yeah, of course it's faster because we have like just ready to go, like a lot of GPUs and the system works, but then we figure some other things that I will tell you later, like something that we clearly say that we need to improve and we need to make it better. And I see that this company, like any other tech startup, any other tech company, never stop developing. So when they say when the development will finish, never. every day we add some other little pieces. At SIGGRAPH, we met the head of production of Cinema 4D, the guys of Maxon. So they approached us. We didn't know that this guy was from Maxon because the badge was upside down. Even if you go hunting, all the
that's also typical of trade shows, right? It's like the more important the person is, the less they want to be found.
They have the badge inside, or they have tied in the pocket, and he approached us and he said, "I'm from Maxon, and you should develop the plugin for Cinema 4D." So we started this conversation, and for us, it's so good to see that producers, software producers, come to us and say they see that that's a potential also for them, because let's imagine that you produce Blender and okay, let's make Cinema 4D because it's a paid software, and if Leonardo becomes a standard for rendering, that's what we hope that it will become in the near future. Let's say that you can access 100,000 GPUs to render something, and you can only access those GPUs if you are a Cinema 4D user. So probably, because it's the only software or just one of the software that we support. So I think it's a benefit for us. It's a benefit for the company. It's a benefit for the user, and we're open to have anything in place, including the licenses, and do things properly. We are going slow because we want to do things properly, and that's one of the things that we told to this guy. We said, as long as you guys are happy with that, we are super happy to develop the plugin, because Marcin and his large team is gonna not sleep for a month, and we have something perfect for Cinema 4D, exactly like Blender. So that's our main point: make everybody happy. It's impossible. I know it's very hard, but we want to make everybody happy, because somebody on the other side would say, "Why not me?" Yeah.
Fair enough. And then I think maybe we should ask about just briefly about file standards in terms of, as you know, cloud rendering has been available to some. To some purchasers. It's been available for a while. This is different in that you are offering a real value to micro data center operators, we'll call them, that are focused on blockchain today. So you're offering them a new bounty that's never been available to them. Cloud Render has been available for some time, as you know, but it's always been contingent on some standards, right? Sending in a very narrow set of standards. It must be sent this way, and it must be sent in these file formats. And you have to provision cloud machines to do it, right, on AWS or somewhere else, potentially. And it's been a little more technical, right, for the person sending the job. In what ways are you solving those problems for artists to make it simpler? And maybe Marcin can talk about this as far as some of the specifics. Are there specific packages or specific scene standards that need to be sent? And how does that affect licensing for the end user? For example, if somebody's working in Blender, do they have to send a specific type of scene, or is it simply a like you said, a one-button press render option from within Blender? How does that change from Autodesk applications? How does that change when working in solids and doing something that's CAD CAM oriented versus something that is for graphic design or arts?
It's definitely much inside.
Because I've got some questions coming out of the audience now. People are saying like, "Hey, so what if I have Autodesk? Can I get a plugin?" That's kind of a generic question, right? It's like, which package from Autodesk? They make almost everything. Yeah. So
yeah, we're trying to make the plugin as simple as possible. We were able to do the single button, just press, click, and everything is happening. But I'm aware that some features will required additional option in the plugin. We don't want to make it complicated, but make it very simple. But so far with the Blender add-on, we didn't have any feedback about additional feature we need. So at the moment we are fine. Later on, when we start develop process on for other products like cinema. For that probably we will need some feedback from users as well, and tell us about what they need and
the thing that we have done in China. So we imagine that you are developing a platform that should be available for any request. And there are software with tons of plugins, and also we have to get all the plugins on the other side to make sure that everything works. And you have to install all these plugins in every mining farm around the world that is joining Leonardo. So it's quite a big, expensive package. So instead of buying all of them, so we went to key clients, productions in China, and we sat with them and said, okay, that's our platform. Consider that as a piece of clay, and we can transform this in the way you want. So tell us your workflow. So what's your software? What's your plugin? What do you usually do? And we've been there for each meeting was 4 hours and a half, 5 hours. It was very long with even the in-betweeners, the artists who make the scene between the keyframes.
Yes.
And that's
wow. That is a rough job, by the way. The in-betweeners.
Yeah, it's a very rough job. Yeah. And they were telling us, even the way they use, what kind of mouse they use, what kind is the one with the sphere, and why we are doing this, because big clients like the Netflix of China, which is called Aikiji, it's going to be very demanding in terms of compute power, plugins, different software. So we said, okay, what do you want? And we will make it. We will get all the plugins that you use, the hair simulation and water simulation, the wind. We will get all of them. And then we will allocate for you a piece of the infrastructure closer to you. And that will be your package. That will be your customized version of Leonardo. So that's what we have done with them. We also met at Pearl Studio, which is a former DreamWorks. We met several TV producers. And for all of them, we are developing a customized solution. Now, at the end of all this journey, we will basically have a multi-option platform in which we just have to put modules and then deliver for a certain group of clients. So we are dividing our potential clients in groups, and each group has a specific pattern of functions. And that's basically how it's very complicated, but the same way it's a very organized way of moving forward. Because if you think, okay, let me get all of them, you will never get out of it. Imagine how many plugins you have only just for Blender.
Right. No, I do imagine, and I mean, having documented the DreamWorks pipeline, I can't talk very publicly about all of their tools, but I do know that most of their tools are proprietary. Yeah. So, they're not DreamWorks anymore. So good. So they've gone back to off-the-shelf options, and they've gone back to just whatever other software packages work.
That's also another problem. They work on CPU.
That is terrible. That really is.
I mean, it's been a standard, and you can sum them forever. You have infinite RAM, but they said, the example of the small boat and the big boat. So you can turn around the small boat immediately, but the big boat like that, in order to change the entire system from CPU, GPU, it takes a little bit. So they saw the trend going towards GPUs finally. And, all the software developing the GPU acceleration functionality. So they said, we will be there. And the day we will be there, we will call you and we will work with you. And we said, don't worry, I'll call you every month to check if you are still on CPU or you're working on GPU.
Yeah. Well, I know when I was at DreamWorks Animation, this is back when Intel was teasing at releasing Larrabee, which went nowhere. And Intel had kind of lured some of DreamWorks' attention away from AMD because they were rendering on Opteron for quite a while, the server class CPU. But when Opteron went to 64-bit, went largely 64-bit, it completely threw them off because they hadn't none of their software was written for double precision, none of it, and so they had these problems with all of their geometry changing scale. So
wow.
it was idiotic. Like this, it's a simple. Rather, it seems like an idiotic problem to have. I'm not calling anybody at DreamWorks Animation an idiot. Please don't sue me. Just saying that, yeah. So hardware changes, and changing hardware platforms for this type of work can have unintended consequences unless you go through the entire software stack and you know exactly how those small hardware changes will propagate throughout your render pipeline. So I hear you.
Yeah.
But any good news from them? Have they been able to tell you, like, yes, we want to take you up on your generous offer? Who wouldn't? You're offering to create a custom solution for them, and you know that you have millions of GPUs ready for mining.
You know how do they make rendering? They send a hard drive to the render farm with a guy on the, I guess, biking over there, and they render the final thing. So of course they don't do this every time they have to make a review. They only do that for for the final rendering. But I told them, can you imagine how it would be to get it done on your computer? And they said, man, it would be mind-blowing, because it would not only speed up the final delivery, because it's already planned. We already know that we will deliver next year, and that bunch of time is going to be for render. But the quality of the final output will be the result of many fast reviews with the film directors, and we can have in real time what's going on. It's not like rocket science. It's just having a faster process. And I always try to explain this to people that don't know about rendering. It's like making a pizza. And imagine that you prepare your fantastic pizza, you do all that, and then you put it in the oven. It's going to be ready like a couple of days. So what do? You start making the pizza 2 days in advance, just because you know that imagine that you can deliver so many pizza, and you can see in the oven what's going on, if it's cooked or not. And that's
Marco, you might have ruined pizza for the rest of my life. I don't want to wait 2 days for a pizza.
Yeah, can you imagine? It's exactly like that. It's rendering is baking what you already done. So
yeah, that is a good example though, because if it were that painful, man, we would all just go to ramen, right? Ramen for the rest of my life. I'm done. I don't care.
It's not fast. You know how long it takes to make ramen, right?
Well, good ramen, yeah.
We'll be there for 2 days of melting down the bones.
Oh, you make a very good point. Yeah, we're so used to stuff being fast, also, and so this just fuels our need for things quickly. But let's ask. Let me jump into the audience questions, because I've gotten a lot of really good questions, and so John, like in the audience, yes, you may paste all of your questions from that notepad file. He's just been writing them down. He's waiting. He can't wait any longer. So go ahead and paste those questions into the comment section, guys. Let me scroll back through to make sure that I have anything that is appropriate for this phase of the interview. I think the bottom line question that a lot of people are asking, though, and this is the big one, and I'm sure that you are ready for this and that you're excited to give us the answer, because I think I know what the answer is. But is this something that is conceptual, or can this potentially be done today? Does it work today?
I mean, the entire Leonardo?
As for the provider, the service provider side, not the artist side, but the distributed render service provider side. Does this work outside of just a conceptual model, or
you know the answer? If you reply to this question, I'll be super happy.
That's the thing a gentleman never tells.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think I can guess the answer.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Okay. So you want me to go ahead with the answer?
Please do.
It is ready. I mean, it is working.
What? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there is one stage that everybody knows, which is the beta, and it's so painful, because you have to put your kid out in the street and see if he can manage to go to work and then come back home safe. And that's basically what happened to our baby. So Marcin worked for 4 years on the software, and then we met a couple of years ago, and we started ruining all his work to make it for Leonardo. But then what was really important for us was the distribution across the miners. This means that, in simple words, you have one computer, which can be a normal computer, it can be a miner. Let's say that a miner. And this miner is a supercomputer that can host like 8 GPUs. Now, you can, because they are sharing the same motherboard and the same CPU, you can literally open Blender or any other 3D software that runs on GPU and make a render with 8 GPUs. Great. That's amazing. So if I am outside and I'm sending a file to this miner, it's basically rendering on 8 GPUs. So let's say now that you have 2 miners. So you have a total of 16 GPUs, but they are 2 separate boxes. And you want to render that same project on 16 GPUs. How do you do that? You can do manually. You can split the scene in 2. So a portion goes here, another portion goes here, and then the output, I will combine them together in the video edit software. Or I use Leonardo, which is a way to combine these 2 miners, or 3 or 4 or 10, and use all that compute power to one project. Now, there are some other solutions out there, but I'm not sure you can do it from your computer. You have to TeamViewer, you have to remote desktop inside. But then putting all this compute power at the service of the render people, it's something that I couldn't find around. Even somebody can please tell me that I'm wrong, but I don't know any other solution that can give you 100 GPUs for one project, or 1,000 or 20,000.
Yeah, so no, that's a fair point. And I haven't had Jules from Otoy on the show just yet. I think Render Token intends to do something similar, but I don't know what the parameters are. So just disclosure, I think that there may be a competitor in the space, but I don't know in which ways they do compete and in which ways they're perhaps very different. But there's another name in the space for sure. That said, I thoroughly appreciate what you guys are doing, and I thoroughly appreciate your approach and your methodology, which is why why I asked if you would come on the show. I've got a couple of very burning questions from the audience. They really, really want to know. And Terry B asks, do you have from the FAQ, does Leonardo intended to work with GPU farms that are fewer than 50 GPUs?
That's a really hot question. So, and it's on my table every day. It's not in a corner. It's right in the center. The reason why we are allowing only 50 GPUs, only a minimum of 50 GPUs. At the beginning it was 100, and then we went back to 50. It's painful because we know that many people have 8, 20, 25, and we can also have a bigger, a wider number of providers. The reason why is first because somebody who has 50 GPUs has probably a kind of a professional power supply system, because to power 50 GPUs, it's and another important thing is with Leonardo Render, you can choose where you want to make your render. So you choose, let's say, the facility in New York, and that facility in New York, who's in the Leonardo ecosystem, has 8 GPUs. Okay, it's a guy who wants to join Leonardo, and then the other guy that is coming and he wants to render on the same facility has no GPUs available, because of course you go and you get all the 8 GPUs or 4 8 GPUs. Let's say that this guy wants 20 GPUs. There are no GPUs available, and it's a bad service, and we don't want this to happen. So we want to have a minimum that will allow at least the average users to have a good number of GPUs available. The second important thing is it's the price. So we are working very hard with the developers to develop something that will be truly decentralized, because now it is decentralized because we don't own GPUs and it's all around us. We're just helping to connect. But a real way, even more broad way to be decentralized is to allow miners to set the price of the rendering. Because let's say that Seth, you have X, the price of your electricity, but another guy could be probably cheaper electricity, or probably it doesn't pay electricity because it's on a WeWork like us. So, okay, we're not mining.
I don't either. Because I know where you're going. I don't either. I can run my test systems overnight. When I do more than that, the landlord's like, "What are you doing?"
No, it's not fair. I mean,
you're not growing drugs back there, are you? No, I'm not.
No, but you can imagine that you can have different operational costs. So if miner can really set the price, then at that point, the client can say, look, this guy has only 2 GPUs available, but he has a fantastic price. I'm going to render with this guy, even if he has 2. So that's our next step. So we will allow people with less than 50 GPUs to join Leonardo Render, but we need to develop a platform that will allow render clients to decide where to render based on availability and price. It's, as you can imagine, it's not so easy. And the moment it goes out in the market, goes out for everybody, it must work perfectly. But at the moment, we're going to stay with the 50 GPUs for technical reasons. There are so many elements in it that we go straight for our path at the moment. So for now, 50.
Okay, fantastic. And you mentioned that it is potentially roadmapped to have fewer than 50 GPUs. Is there an approximate timeline for that on the roadmap? Say Q1 of 2019, Q4 of 2019?
Okay, it's I'm really honest. We don't know when this could be available because it could be tomorrow morning because we figured something out and it triggers the entire production, or it can be probably at the end of next year. I don't fake our roadmap, as we usually are really clear. We said we have something to improve, to do, but I hope as soon as possible because I understand, especially from yesterday, Ethereum and the profitability. We want the miners to join us and and just offer even just 1 GPU if possible. But as for the reasons that I mentioned, it's complicated at the moment. Yeah.
Sure. And that's just fine. Definitely appreciate that. I think what we found, so Igor from SonM, I don't know if you've spoken to the SonM team at all. I think there probably should be more open communication between large projects that have maybe some overlap, similarities, or some potential synergies, right? Some possibility for alignment, strategic alignment. But Igor from SonM, their model is kind of geared much more towards the user that has a couple of GPUs. Now theirs is very different in that I don't know that strictly speaking it can be used for distributed render. It's possible that they'll be able to offer that down the line. I don't think so today. Let's talk about security. This has been one of the biggest questions that my audience has had on, and this is a shared problem between the service provider and the person issuing the job, the entity issuing the job. How are you handling security for the distributed compute? This might be more of a Marcin question.
Yeah, I think I can just give the general, but then definitely go into Marcin. So the way Leonardo works, we have a touch point in the facility, which is a server. And that server is just one client. So if Seth goes for a rendering with Leonardo, he will have a dedicated server right away, the moment he's connected. So you have, I don't have our server right now, but it's a big guy. And that big guy is not accessible by the owner of the facility. It's a Leonardo piece of hardware. And that hardware is locked and is secured by any cybersecurity provider that is available in that country. And it's not accessible by anyone, not even by me. It's locked. And the moment...
Yeah, I think we're going to want to hear from Marcin how you achieve that lock. But yeah. Go on.
I mean, I'm talking about physical lock, but then Marcin can tell you how
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, Ilya will probably smile when, sometimes all you need is an IP address. And in the blockchain space, we have very, very meticulous network hygiene because of the way that, because of how security affects what we do in this space. So I'd love to know more about from a hardware and a software perspective, more specifically from a software and network perspective, how security is achieved.
Yeah,
please.
We will do. Yeah, security is a very deep subject here. We'll do our best to secure the system, the box that Marco mentioned. We also secure every connection to from the application to the miner to other components of the software. Everything is encrypted. And the only part we cannot encrypt is it's a process itself. That's nobody can achieve this. So we are as secure as any other render farms and other facilities like AWS or any other.
Okay, cloud. That's a fair point. Can I ask in a more pointed way? Can I ask in terms of the render side or the provider side, what kind of environment does a provider have to set up in order to run the Leonardo Render software? Do we need to, for example, install a full distribution of Linux that then has the Leonardo package already installed? Do we need to provision a Docker container that has some packages already, and then install some packages within a Docker container? Like what are we doing on our end to provide the service that is then brokered by Leonardo Render?
Okay, we are not going to use Docker containers because of GPU and the Windows. It doesn't work simply. We will have a package that everybody can install in the Linux and Windows.
Okay,
very
cool.
Simple process.
Very cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a huge departure from some of the competitors in the distributed compute space. Certainly, that's great. Okay, so how then does the service provider provision the resources necessary on that machine or on that cluster to be able to provide the service? 50 GPUs, for example, would require that they either create their own cluster, and then they turn that over, or how? Like to what extent is this going to take a miner out of their way? For example, Andreas in the comments just said, "I have 60 GPUs running 24/7, and I'd love to jump on." How do we get Andreas up and running with Leonardo Render? Technologically, what does he have to do to be able to offer his 60 GPUs to this service?
Yeah, technically he could just get a special token and that token will allow him to register with the Leonardo software, and that's it, and it's done actually.
Okay, so
and everything will be propagated. The information about the GPU will be propagated, and everybody will have access from the application.
Okay, awesome. And so Leonardo, then you then distribute the job to the multiple client or to multiple host devices that Andreas, for example, is running. If he has those 60 GPUs split across maybe five different host systems, then you're able to resolve that on your end. He doesn't have to do anything in terms of configuring the system.
Yeah, except install the software. He doesn't and he doesn't have to do anything about that. Just install the software and register with Leonardo.
Very cool.
Service.
Yeah, very, very cool. That's great. So I hope
very easy.
Yeah, guys, I got to hand it to you. That definitely sounds a bit easier than some of the other distributed compute projects that we've spoken to. And Docker containers have been the go-to answer, by the way, for almost everyone. So that's why for me it was like, okay, please don't tell me Docker containers. Tell me anything but Docker containers, please.
So I can tell you honestly, I was following the test that we're running on new facilities that they are jumping on board, and I think I can say some names. There is one in United States called Atlantic, and we're testing now with Marcin. So there is some little things that they have to tell us in terms of port forwarding or something. I mean, it's not my stuff, but technically what happened is that we TeamViewer inside each miner, and we install the software, and we do the little tweaks that needs to be done for the router side, that side, and we also, when everything is done, we send the server to the client, which is the place where all the projects will land. But beside this, they don't really have to do. They only have to decide how many miners they want to allocate. And the important thing is they must be miners mining, because if it's a render farm, it doesn't work for us because we cannot stop a rendering.
Got it. Okay.
We can stop mining, but we cannot stop rendering.
Got it. Okay. So you have process priority over in the mining software then.
Exactly. So we have this system that close and reopen the miner software just once the rendering job is done.
Yeah.
So your line is mining, rendering, mining again, just right away.
Yeah. Awesome. I think in a week like this week with profitability for mining very low, that's very good news to know that you can take over for something that should be a higher payout. I've got so many questions lighting up the comments now. Thank you so much for talking a little more about the deep dive. This tends to light up this audience where they say, okay, cool. You told us a little bit. Now that brings up a different question. But I've got, so Roderick brings up a really great point about software licensing. So right now, as I understand it, Leonardo Render was primarily custom built for open source packages, but clearly you want to be able to address distributed render for several commercial packages. What does that mean for the provider? Do they have to pay for any kind of licensing? Is it on their end? Do they have to install any kind of special packages for rendering other than the Leonardo Render package?
So that's a very hot question at the moment, because what we're doing now, we are talking to software providers, software producers, and we have basically two simple ways. I'll be very open to this, because the easiest way is asking to the provider to buy a new license. So one little step back, Leonardo Render offer by default availability for Blender, because it's free and you have to install whatever you want because it's open source and free. And by the way, Blender has 500,000 downloads a month, so it's a big number of users.
It's an amazing package too. So many open source packages are usable. I edited your thumbnail on the GIMP, by the way, and I do my vector art in Inkscape. And so and when possible, I do my 3D art in Blender as well. So I'm a huge open source proponent. My audience knows.
So good. I mean, Blender is very, very good. But then, the moment a provider, it's somebody who is in business with us, and we have the basic provider who is okay to work with Blender and see how it goes with Blender customers, but then he wants to make an upgrade and says, look, out of 10 miners, I want to allocate a couple of miners for the next hot software, and it's 3ds Max, for instance, or another one that use they can render on GPU. So one way is this provider buy the license for himself, and it's his own license for his nodes. The other way is we get a deal with this company as Leonardo Render, and then we have, let's say, some sort of discount, and we hope that this will happen, and we offer this to our GPU providers. I honestly, the conversation it's just the very beginning. We didn't really touch yet this point with them. We are still on it works, it doesn't work, and it's on technical side. But we have these two. We hope to be on the second one, in which the company trusts us and give us some sort of discount to give to third parties licenses. But it's, as you can imagine, it's more complicated. And the other way is more simple. I'm a provider. I want to also be on Maya, and then I upgrade to my license.
Yeah, sorry, I've got my community, they like to troll too. So Ilya, they're telling you that you work in blockchain. You have to grow a beard.
So I'm actually not a blockchain engineer. I'm more from analytics, economics side of that part.
Still, if you work in blockchain, I think it's an unwritten rule.
Probably. I'll work on that very hard. It's hard to fight with some genetics, but I'll do my best.
Well, to your point, that's why so many of us grow our beards, is because we're either going gray or bald up here. So yeah, only so much you can do. So I'm got a couple other questions, and guys, thank you so much for being so open, Marco. Really, especially for the vulnerability and being very open, especially when there are answers that are still in development or still being worked on. Thank you so much. This means a lot, as you know, to this audience to be able to build their trust and feel like this is a project that we can support. So much appreciate that.
It's very important for us to to show, because we used to show the strong side and we say, look how cool we are, we can render with BUM, and then we said, but as you know, we have this other side which is in development, and it's a pre-ICO company that has something that can run right now. If you go Leonardo, you can play with it. So it's, for us, it's already a lot. So
yeah, no, and that is great. That is great. Yeah, you don't have to apologize for the shortcomings because you've clearly put in real work on the stuff that does work. So that's great. Let me jump back into some of the questions here, and Roderick.
Some other beard stuff.
It's more beard stuff. Yeah, he says it's a symbol of truth and nobility. Okay, guys, give it up. He's not going to grow a beard in this video chat. I mean, you could go put one and paste some, I don't know, cut your hair and paste it on your face. But so somebody's asking about PCIe 1x limitations, which, as you know, for infrastructure by way of hardware, so many miners run their hardware in a rendering environment and both for a video encoding environment would be bandwidth constraints. But for blockchain, it hasn't decreased performance, which is why we've all in our CapEx, we've all opted for motherboards and systems that would seem underpowered. How does Leonardo Render hold up when you have 50 GPUs that are on PCIe 1x risers and using Celeron processors with only 4 gigs of system RAM? This is a very common configuration.
Yeah. It's a March inside, but I can be as general as usual, but I think it's on marching. If he's still there.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes. This is really constrained about the motherboard. For 4 gigabytes, it's almost nothing. And most of our partners are willing to upgrade the hardware, the RAM especially. We have also others that have really nice setup, and this is not alpha miners. It's custom built, so they have a big CPU and big RAM, and in our GPU selection, some software won't work with such a low setup. So everybody can choose between the simple project that run like a Blender, simple Blender project to run on the 4 gig or 8 gig RAM in the 8 GPUs, or can pick up another setup with big CPU and big RAM.
Okay, let's talk about minimum requirements or minimum recommended system build out, Marcin, if you don't mind. From a hardware perspective, what would the ideal host device for a service provider be built like? From CPU specs to RAM to the recommended GPUs that would work best for your clients.
Yeah, the ideal, the dream one would be minimum 16 gigabytes and CPU with minimum 4 cores with multi-threading at 4 gigahertz CPU clock. That would be the dream of, but a minimum to cover most of the projects. It's 8 gigabyte RAM and CPU with four cores. But I'm aware that most miners have only two cores of CPU. But as I said previously, not all projects can run on those miners. So client will select another one.
Got it. Okay, so and I apologize if you could just clarify for me one more time with the PCI Express lanes. 1x is a bit of a constraint, and are you saying it is in terms of being able to contribute meaningfully to these render jobs? Do we need to have 8x, a full 16x, PCI Express lane for each GPU?
Yeah, actually it depends on the engine. Some engines are pure GPU, and one X1 PCI is only constrained bottleneck at uploading the data to GPU. But after that, it doesn't matter if it's only X1 or X16. It works, but there are also other render engine hybrid one that do the rendering at the same time in CPU and GPU. So
just
that
time on the GPU.
Constrain that PCI.
Okay, so as far as it being profitable for a mining operation to use their current infrastructure, is the 1X PCI Express riser? It's very common. I mean, I have some boxes and boxes of them, right, lying around. We all do in this community, but boxes and boxes of these things with various. Here's an older nope, not an older generation, but here's the U-bit, I think version 9, and so we have these. They're all intended to run at 1x speed, and many of us have these by the hundreds, by the thousands, and to replace that with motherboards that have a broader bandwidth per GPU might represent capex that we then have to recoup. We have to break even on for a project like this. Is that something that we can start with today and be profitable?
On my general side, I can say that we ran some experiment here in the office building our own miner, also mixed with NVIDIA and AMD, and it was working. It was incredible. It was working. So we had those pieces, the one with the soft bottom, and it was working. The thing is, the scene gets uploaded on the GPU. The scene gets uploaded a little probably slower when it comes to this setup. But you have to consider that the moment the upload is happening, you're still mining, and the client is not paying yet. The client starts paying or consuming credits when the rendering starts. So none of you guys are losing anything. Probably on the other side, if it's a very, very heavy scene, the render client will experience a little slower upload, but not as low to be so painful and say, oh my God, the upload is longer than the rendering, so this is not going to happen. We never experienced that thing. So the rendering, when the rendering goes, there's no that piece is not involved because it's already on the GPU. So and then sending back is probably another little bottleneck, but this doesn't affect the profitability of the miners, and it's going to probably affect a little bit the upload time of the client in this first stage of beginning of everything. I think it's good enough. It's acceptable to have just a little bit of slow, because we are operating on machines that are not meant to run rendering, even though the GPU, yes, but all the other things around not. But then it still works. Of course, as Marcin correctly said, if it's a medium, small project scene, it's okay. If it starts being a very complicated and heavily textured scene, it's probably going to be a little bit of a bottleneck.
Got it. Okay, so maybe manage artists' expectations and say we would like to render in 720p, please. Low textures everywhere, low res textures. I kid, obviously.
We don't want the artists to limit their thing, but
no, I kid. Yeah,
you can choose the infrastructure that you want, and you see the specs, and then you see what kind of machines they have. So they have choice.
Okay, phenomenal. If I can ask again, I think so. Based on the response, what I think I'm hearing is that 16 gigs of RAM would be helpful, the ideal, and then a 4 gigahertz, 8-core CPU, so 4 physical and it's 4 physical with hyperthreading would be ideal, and then the 1X PCI Express risers are not too big a constraint to get started. As far as the GPU, minimum required GPU, there are many miners that use, for example, the GTX 1050 Ti. Not my first choice for rendering. people mine with it, not my first choice for rendering, what would be the minimum that's accepted for Leonardo Render?
So it really depends on the size of the scene. So we have to consider that if a GPU is 4 gigabytes of RAM, it can operate on a scene that is just 4 gigabytes of RAM, right? If it's pure GPU rendering, if it's pure GPU engine, if it's a 1080 Ti, it can host like 11 GPUs, 11 gigabytes. So it really depends on the size of the scene. And so that's basically where the truth is. If you have a bigger GPU, a bigger space in the RAM, you can host bigger scenes. And I think the market will kind of auto-shape. So the guys with smaller GPUs, let's say 4 gigabytes, are gonna probably receive small jobs, small scenes, and then the rendering clients with higher needs will gonna opt for infrastructure with bigger GPUs. That's basically not natural flow. They will pick the one that they need. That's why we want to put a flexible price for the miners. They can decide, because say, look, I have a small GPUs, but I cost less. So it will auto shape the thing. So my suggestion is to, if you have a 1050 Ti, keep it and see if you can find the right pricing for your work, and then attract more client. Because of course there is a difference between Gigawatt, who has 23,000 GPUs right away, and me, who I have probably just my 50 GPUs here, but I cannot compete with them. But then I have cheaper electricity probably, and I can play with it. The 1060, it's our minimum suggestion or similar. I personally never experienced a rendering on 1050. Probably Marcin can tell more about it. We started with basic 1060 and the equivalent for mining.
Okay, got it. So I'm hearing 1060 is the best, and I apologize. You've got me typing and reading comments as you go, but I'm picking up almost every word. I apologize. I don't know if it's too much caffeine or too little, but I am a little bit off. I'll admit. Right. Yeah, it's what is it? It's 6 a.m. somewhere. Thankfully not here. So I should ask also, where is all of the team? Are you all remote? Where is everybody based in the world?
I mean, for Leonardo?
Yes, for Leonardo.
Oh, we can show you guys. Come.
Wait, are they really just there in the office?
Yeah, I'm in the office. I mean, I can show you Taylor. I don't know if you can hear that, but she's our project manager. Yeah.
Hey, it's always great to see a female anywhere on the show. Thank you, Taylor.
She's not hearing. So we have the New York office, the Los Angeles office. Then we have the guys who are touching around the things in Gigawatt, so in Washington State. Then we have Marcin and his team in Poland. Ilya is now in Russia. Then
Moscow.
In Moscow.
Hey,
then
there's a difference.
Then there is we have a couple of guys in Vietnam, because it's pretty hot over there. We have our sales team in China, and we're pretty around the world.
Okay, phenomenal. That's great. How does that affect your guys? I mean, it's got to make stand-up meetings a pain.
Yeah, nobody sleeps. That's the thing. Not a coffee. Yeah, I mean, it's whatever you wake up in the morning, you have Telegram list of messages, people working, people doing things. And I was jet lagged like hell, like last week coming back from China, and I wasn't sleeping. And at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was on the sofa, and then I said, so what I do? Picked up my phone and said, everybody working, so not a problem. That's a good side. That's a good side. And then on the other hand, we have this night meetings, as you can imagine. But it's so good to have a multi super mixed team.
Yeah,
many cities. Yeah,
awesome. Well, I mean, that's I can only imagine. My brother does development for email, and he's just now stepping into a team where they have Thankfully, it's only 2 locations. It's only Central United States and then Australia. But, that time zone difference is like almost exactly backwards.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
It's like, well, yeah. So anyway, I digress. It sounds like 1060 and higher is what you recommend.
At the moment, yes. But just because I have to say I don't have experience with 1050. So Marcin probably can say something about the 1050, but I'm honest on this.
I would say that because of GPU generation change over the time, and it's not only the computation power, but also the memory. So basically, if someone have a GPU for 4 gigabytes of memory, it's fine, because it also much high computation power as well.
Okay, fantastic. I've got a very relevant question. This is kind of from the miner space, moving into this concept of distributed render. You're talking about there being 50 GPUs as sort of a minimum standard. Is that because you want to vet the service provider? You want to make sure that they are a secure service provider? Or is it because you mentioned the other constraints? Is it possible to pool resources in the ways that miners do? So create a service pool between, say, 4 service providers that have 16 cards each.
I mean, different locations. Mm-hmm. So no, it's not possible to combine these guys together. That's the first point. If you want to combine those GPUs together, they got to be in the same location for our technology. And then probably somebody has already developed or is developing or will develop something that will make this possible. But if you want to make GPU virtualization and collect all this compute power in one box and then allocate this box whatever you want, and I'm not talking only about rendering. I can talk about any discipline that use GPU. For our technology, they must be in the same network.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's basically the reason why. Now, I believe that as a designer, if I can connect and make my rendering on 8 GPUs, I'm still good. I mean, 8 GPUs is a lot, guys. We
also,
are working.
Ilya, my audience says that they were just kidding about the beard joke. You can come back on camera.
Yeah, I'm just reading the comments. It's fun.
You have different
okay.
Yeah, they go a mile a minute. I literally average at least 5 to 6 comments a minute, so they are very engaged. Generally,
I think it's the silent rock star at the moment. Everybody wants to talk.
So let's ask about, in terms of either the settlement layer and tokenizing rewards, focusing on the blockchain. How does Leonardo Render bring something unique to this space of distributed render or distributed compute?
Okay, so our idea is that we would like to use decentralization as a force to drive the project, but we would like to do it gradually. So what we currently see is that there are some decentralized computing projects that are mostly not really usable for an average client, an average person. It's really complicated, and there are a hell of a lot of limitations in terms of blockchain technology. So, you cannot send files via blockchain, etc. So what we decided to do is move gradually, decentralizing the project. So we started with decentralizing the hardware layer. So we do not have our own GPUs. We use the miner's power. So at first we look something close to the Uber, probably. So we have the software, and we have a centralized engine that distributes the tasks, etc. But we are distributed in terms of the GPU power. So we are dependent on the miners, and we would like to make them happy. So they join our network and provide the GPUs, etc. And after that, we believe that we might use the opportunities. So another point that we can use with blockchain is the payments. It's actually the easy one, because if you want to send $2 from one country to another, good luck with that. You won't be able to use some traditional financial infrastructure. but that's what miners like are doing for years, buying with a mining pool, etc. So like at first, Leonardo actually would operate in some way similar to some mining pools. So it will be also some centralized process of gathering the tasks and distributing them. But what we believe we can do in the future, for example, when it becomes possible to make the whole payment process decentralized, whether due to like mass adoption of the cryptocurrencies or due to some stable coins that appear and become like widely usable, we can, for example, just shift the payment part completely to the network and just get rid of that centralized part of our project. It will help us both to like reduce the costs that we will currently need to incur and make it more transparent and more usable to the users. So we are constantly exploring the ways how we can decentralize the project and make it more open and transparent. But we currently recognize the limitations that we have in the blockchain space. And if you look at almost any project in the space, it's extremely centralized. So it like has one development team, etc. So like our vision is that we will gradually decentralize the project, starting from decentralizing the hardware layer, and then just move up in the value chain until hopefully one day we will be able to decentralize every part of the process without hurting the user experience, because like for now it's just impossible to do.
Sure, no, so, that makes a lot of sense, and definitely hear you there in terms of not being able to fully decentralize what you're doing by way of distributing the jobs. And it's weird that that's one of the criticisms of a lot of the blockchain community. It's like, we want everything decentralized right away. It's like, well, that's hard to do when you're dealing with paid services.
Yeah.
Like in bounties. Like, so, I mean, anybody in the audience who's maybe critical of that, calm down. These guys they're solving a really difficult and valuable problem. So thank you for speaking to that, Ilya. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
As far as tokenizing rewards and as far as paying for service providers, what can we expect as far as the experience there? I mean, most of the audience, they represent either people who are working on proof of work algorithms or they have their own micro data centers for blockchain. How, like, just in the simplest terms, how does payment work for them?
Yeah, so at first it will look like I don't know, a software from the mining pool, or so you will have just your like account, and you'll get rewards like the income that you got from rendering tasks that will be calculated and distributed. Probably not that often, because we won't be able to do that like hourly, but probably once a week. Or at least we will start from that and then try to like make it faster. So that will be just we calculate a number of tasks that you did, the time that you spent, and after that you just get proportional payment in Ether, or like I think we will start with Ether and probably explore some other cryptocurrencies after that.
Got it. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. You're looking at which token, or we can we will distribute the rewards most probably in Ethereum, in Ether. Got it. I apologize. I misheard. Thank you for repeating. I appreciate it. So awesome. That makes sense. And I know at least for a lot of miners, that feels safe. Yeah. Thank you for not just creating a new token and saying, "Hey, it's our it's the Leonardo token. We don't know what it's worth, but here you go." Like, we know that clients are paying they're paying in fiat and whatever the local currency is. And so they whatever the currency is, it does make sense from a distributed render perspective to have maybe not like a pegged coin like Tether or whatever. That's ridiculous. But because there's no telling what's going to happen to Tether, as the SEC and IRS are like, they don't even know what's going to happen with it. So so Ether makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we actually have a token, but it serves another function. So we believe that like most projects that currently operate distributed computing, like Golem, Attribution, or some other, they use a token as a payment, like in their network. So and it really it really creates bad user experience, because like it's really hard to explain to some designer how to use Golem. Like you go to Coinbase, you buy Bitcoin, you then go to Binance, you buy Golem, etc. So we decided not to use our token as a payment. We will use it as a payment option, but not as a payment requirement. But what our token
Bravo.
is...
Team, I appreciate that. And everybody in the comments is saying that they appreciate it as well, by the way. And suggesting Monero. Just throwing it out there.
Probably not from day one, but we will definitely look into it. But so what miners will need our token for is we have stakes or security deposits that you need to make per every GPU, and it serves like several basic functions. The first one is that if miners do not perform well for one reason or another, whether they like fail rendered tasks, or whether they like try to use some pirate software, etc., it gives like a skin in the game. So it just motivates the miners to behave well. And what is another great feature of their like people who operate the protocol and own some tokens is that it actually gives you like a free marketing, because you have a lot of people, like thousands of people, who have the asset that might like its well-being might depend on their performance, both in terms of rendering, and like they will have like a desire to tell everybody about the project, because they just have a little part of that. So we use the token first from a like security deposit, just to ensure the proper behavior of all the mining participants. And another one is just like we believe that cryptocurrencies create cryptocurrency tokens create like huge viral marketing mechanics that like cannot be done like in another way. And it will help us greatly to like just spread the word about the project and develop it using a lot of like influences, and not just like paying for Facebook ads, because like it's a huge multi-billion industry, and how it doesn't matter how much money you can raise during the ICO, even it's like 100 million or like 250 million like Filecoin, it will be really hard to like to promote your project forever with this money. So what we are trying to do is to use the power that blockchain communities can create, and use it to help develop the project.
That's phenomenal. Okay, Leah, I really appreciate you giving a lot of clarification there, because the community, I think, needed to know what the token was for, and needed to understand also with reputation management on the provider side. You had mentioned before, Marco, that the artists would be able to choose where they would get service from, and it sounds like the token is going to be the mechanism through which you'll do reputation management as a service provider, is what I'm understanding on some level.
There will be a rating system, and there will also be, I mean, I like the fact that Elias says the miner behaves well. It's really, it's really teachable, but it's more or less, it's the truth, because if you shut down the power, you are basically offering a bad service to the rendering client, especially if you're in the middle of a rendering, or you're just shutting down the power of the entire facility. So we want the service to be up and running all the time, and the token will have this quality control, because we are responsible for what we are offering. And I know it's complicated, it's a big paragon, but we are like Uber, so we are.
Oh no. Yeah. Never say you're like Uber or Airbnb.
No, I mean, it's bad to say, but we are offering.
Because if you're like Uber, then you're like Travis. You are literally like Travis Kalanick. Don't ever say you're like Uber.
Okay, but in the same way, we are offering a service out of a hardware that we don't own. So in a way, we got to make sure that the service is good. The rating is it's good. It's a good system, but at the same time, we want everybody happy, and which is hard to achieve, but the token, it's a fair mechanism to make sure that this guy have something to lose in case they don't perform well. So
okay, phenomenal. No, that's super important. Yeah, otherwise you're going to get a bunch of junk listings in the service provider roster. That makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of the comments that I'm reading in the comment section are in the affirmative. I think most people are on board with this because those miners that run a really good operation, they don't want to be listed on the same page as miners that don't, right? Like,
exactly.
It helps decrease the bad competition. So thank you for putting putting the bar in place there. As far as there being, like you said, a rating system, or as far as there being rating system and reputation system, Ilya mentioned that part of this would be on the blockchain and would be a part of the token.
It will be after some time, so we won't have it from day one, but we definitely move in that direction. So as soon as it becomes technically possible and wouldn't slow the project and wouldn't hurt customer experience, etc., we'll definitely try to move it that way as soon as possible.
Okay. So in the meantime, though, you'll do a traditional rating system that just uses a database, and that a bit like.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll start with that.
Okay, hey, I think that's fine. So my audience knows that, in my opinion, not everything needs to be on blockchain from day one. For example, I don't want the IRS to use blockchain.
Definitely.
They make too many mistakes. They can be terrible. I don't want an immutable ledger of their mistakes. So awesome. And I think probably the same for a miner that may be mischaracterized as not a good service provider first, and then wants a chance at redemption and to be able to rise through your stacked rankings. Right. So having a traditional database, what is just today, what would be, wow, we've gone almost 2 hours. Let me ask some different questions. Let me ask just really briefly, because I appreciate the time that you've given the community. You've answered so many questions. You've been so great about taking curveballs too, right, that come from the audience and then sometimes from me. So thank you so much for your time. Why don't we try to wind down here? But a couple of relevant questions that I'm seeing with security. What I'm hearing is you're not using Docker containers, so that's a little bit less of a concern by way of the end service provider doing, for example, scraping memory and stealing assets. To talk about the worst case scenario in the open, how does your solution today secure assets for the top bounties out there, the Disneys of the world, right? The Disney Entertainments, the Marvel Studios, etc. I know. Marco, you and I both know we want them, right? Yeah. We want them on board. We absolutely do. And some of the miners in the audience don't know that we need them on board and that we really want them on board. How do we overcome this together? We all want to make this happen. We want to make this work.
Yeah, there is not, that people get fired in this company if they during a beer they talk about what project they're working on. So what are you working on? Next Batman, fired day after, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. If you work in Cupertino without naming the company, and you go across the street and say that you're just working on the new edge of the new iPhone 11, they have ears everywhere. So imagine if there is a leakage of the next Shrek, or we have from day one this dream of a direct connection between the client and the GPUs without passing through Leonardo. So this is the project that Marcin can confirm. So we started with this dream, which is I am the client, I have my software on my computer, and I have my design. Now, what happened is the software is talking to my GPU to deliver the final render. But what if my computer is connected? The Leonardo software allows this software to, instead of watching the internal GPU, is watching the infrastructure mining GPUs. So we did it, and it was working. But I don't like to say that we were ahead of time, but technically there was no enough technology, internet connection, and and hardware to make it possible so fast that there is a product that can go to market. So what was happening is that the upload time was longer than the rendering. And the moment you start uploading this thing, it basically stopped mining, and then the client is not rendering and the miner is not mining. And it's the only solution, that's why I'm going there, to avoid any leakage of content. Because any other solution out there is basically sending the project on an external server and then running the rendering. And then if somebody breaks into that server, it's bad. It's a bad thing. So this is the Leonardo 2.0 that will happen, I hope, as soon as possible, which doesn't require additional licenses, which it doesn't require any super security protocol, because it's just your computer connected with our infrastructure, with with any GPU infrastructure. If you consider that, it's fairly simple, because imagine that you have the Leonardo software that makes the virtualization, so collection of all the GPU's power, and then putting all this power to the service of one server. Then you are in the network, like with a VPN or with any other solution, and then you are technically talking directly with this server. You don't need to send your package, your zip file into this computer. It's already operating directly. But if you're doing this from in this building, it's going to be awesome. But if you are in China and you are rendering with the nearest facility, which is probably in Malaysia, the upload and time and the process, it's going to be so long that it's not good. This why? Because GPU are meant to work on a motherboard with something that is already uploaded on the hard drive in the motherboard. It's not meant to receive file from outside. So I hope that we will overcome this thing. I'm kind of opening a little bit our box, but it's what Leonardo was supposed to be at the beginning. That's our initial promise to our clients. But then we said, okay, this is not possible right now. So let's make like any conventional solution, which you send the zip file and then we render and send back, while our R&D department is working on that thing, which is just having a better internet and having a different class of GPUs, different models that would probably be there, I don't know, probably next year and 2 years. We don't know.
Okay, got it. All right. It sounds like there's a bit on the roadmap that still needs to be gotten to by way of security in order to broaden up deepen the user base, not broaden it. I'm sure there are plenty of different verticals that would be able to use this service, but maybe deepen the user base within Hollywood specifically, where there are very high value assets that need to be contained.
At the moment, there are many other things that the security it's one point, and then we can secure files from our client. But when it comes to extreme security, because I don't want to say, even if I do my house, I don't want people to know how my house it's made in 3D, and it's as important as the Hollywood one. But we know that there are some more money involved in that thing than in my 3D project house. So that's why we want to protect both clients at the same time, in the same way. But at the moment, the file is leaving the client's computer and is landing in another place that for us it's very secure, because it's a locked server, and that's cybersecurity, and the file gets deleted immediately right after the rendering. But the 2.0 security, it's going to be probably just no file sent, just encrypted data directly to the GPU. So that's our bet, and that's what we are going in terms of security.
Okay, phenomenal. Can I ask, and we should either schedule another interview for another time. Maybe we'll do a BitTube exclusive. I don't know. I still can't tell audience. By the way, I've got a couple things brewing with a couple of notable Reddit subreddits. So we'll see if we can go with a broader audience within those subreddits. But that hasn't happened yet. So teaser, you heard it here first. But I'd love to have the team back on to talk a little bit more and do a deep dive if that's possible. I know I've asked you for so much. 2 hours of your time I know is very precious right now at this phase of development. So thoroughly appreciate it. So 2 hours times 3. Thank you. Means so much that you've taken that time. Can I just ask, as far as the team, as far as the monetization of the service, so service providers, on the website it says that for purchasing GPU render, it's approximately 25 cents per GPU per hour. Is that, am I reading that correctly? That is for the purchase.
Yeah. It will start at 25 cents. Yeah.
Starting at 25 cents per hour, per render hour, not per upload hour, right?
No.
Yeah.
Just render.
Right. Is there any kind of info you can give to miners now, or any kind of a breakdown or projection you could give, even ballparking, what profitability may look like for them based on hardware that they're running right now, doing rendering? So per render hour on, say, we'll use as a benchmark the GTX 1070 or GTX 1060, if that's what you're using. Approximately what kind of profits can they expect to earn from Leonardo Render?
Okay, so we currently have 0.25 up to $0.5 per GPU hour, depending on the GPU model. Like 1080 Ti will be more costly than some like 1050, for example. So you can just multiply the number of hours that the GPU performs rendering tasks and have some estimation like how much you can earn in an hour, in a day, in a week, etc. What we cannot do right now is estimate the utilization, like how long, how many hours a week or a day or a month your GPU will do rendering actually, because like it's highly unpredictable, and like we can do some wild guesses, but I don't think it will be helpful at this stage. So like probably the simple thought experiment would be like, what would happen if my GPU renders like 10% of the time and 9% will be mining? Like how much extra income I would get, and you can arrive to some numbers based on like price per GPU per hour. What we can say is that like currently mining gives like 2 or 3 cents per hour, and our rendering price is like much cheaper than the market. We did some benchmark with probably 10 render farms, and Leonardo was like 2 to 5, 6 times cheaper per the same picture rendered. So we just took some Blender benchmark.
You guys are selling us short. You got to raise your rates.
Yeah. So that's what we say is that our prices are not set in stone. We might adjust them. And as Marcus said earlier, we would like to move in the future just to an open market where you can set like $2 per GPU or like 20 cents, and it will be up to the miners. But for now, yeah, we what we can say is that like you definitely wouldn't earn less with Leonardo, because like in the worst case scenario, you will just don't have any rendering tasks and you will earn the same mining Ethereum. But you can have like a large upside that is that will be probably not that significant in the first days, because you just cannot create like a huge global rendering network from day one. But we believe that after some time, it will create like a real substantial additional income for the miners, and that's actually what we're working hard to achieve.
Okay, awesome. I've got two more the very relevant questions to the income equation, and then I think I probably need to let you go. It's been 2 hours. So again, really appreciate your time. I've got a question about Red Rocket cards, which, as you know, are the encoding cards and the acceleration cards for Jim Janner's Red camera system. But that's more video encoding and video decoding and encoding in real time, not so much 3D rendering. Is there any roadmap item for doing video encoding, or it's primarily focused on 3D rendering? Yes?
We are focusing on 3D rendering at the moment, and then we want to expand any any video operation, even encoding, even if you want to finalize your Premiere rendering. But at the moment, one step at a time, we will start with rendering, which is already a big field.
Okay, yeah, for sure. That's great to hear that that video encoding is perhaps on the roadmap. So good news, more work.
Yeah, a lot.
And can I ask also, as far as CPU rendering and CPU rendering plugins, if service providers have a particularly robust CPU environment with their systems, will that be leveraged as well?
This is more on Marcin side, but I have a couple of software, including Keyshot, who they run in CPU, and they also have the network render, so it's basically already built. The virtualization of the CPU. So if you have a lot of CPUs, I mean, for already built CPU virtualization, you don't even actually need Leonardo. If you have a miner with a CPU inside, and you have many miners with many CPU inside, you can actually run CPU rendering as well. At the moment, Leonardo is fully focused on GPU. We are looking, with the tail of our eye, just a little bit on the CPU also, but we try to spend all our energy on GPU at the moment, even though we would love to have it ready right now, because we know it is possible. But the technology that we have now is so powerful on GPU that we are just focusing on making it better and better. And that's the reason also why we're making an ICO, because more people and more delivery in terms of functionality, including the CPU.
Okay, phenomenal. So it sounds like then CPU is something to look forward to as well. Not, like as you mentioned, not promising on a roadmap, but it is something that you're aware of and want to work on.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I had a couple of comments saying that they've got multi-Threadripper systems, so they've got some pretty beefy CPUs waiting to be used somehow, but don't mind right now. Last question that I have for you, and that is, it comes from one of our moderators from Discord, our chief ambassador, Corey. Thanks so much for chiming in. But what kind of demand have you been able to measure with render hours so far? And what kind of demand can we look forward to based on your market validation so far?
So together with Ilya and his team, we ran a pretty large analysis. I tell you just a little bit of the background. So we started with what we call the manually activated rendering, because our front-end application wasn't ready yet, back like 7-8 months ago. But we had already interested clients, mostly architectural studios and a couple of design firms here in New York. One is Levin Silbert, the other one is printparts.com. They work for the defense, Fortune 500. So they do, especially the print part guys, they do 3D printings, but they showcase the product before, and they were and they are already rendering with us. The way it works, they didn't really know how to work with Leonardo. So we said, don't worry, just send the rendering to us and we will make it. And then sending it back with a bunch of NDAs and a lot of things going on, a lot of secrecy. But also the architectural firm in G Design in Milan and Gray Singapore, the advertising agency. So it's an idea of how the market will use Leonardo. So we just went out there, making a couple of pitches, and they said, absolutely, right now, we want this to use right now. But the application wasn't ready yet. Now that it's ready, they're already using it. Okay. So based on our research, we imagine that, let's say, a facility with 100 GPUs, okay? So the market should respond based on our projection on something that is between 8% and something around 45-50% of saturation. It's a lot. It's a big range, but nobody did this before, so we never know where exactly this thing will fall. But it will probably fall in this range. If we will fall after the 45-50% of saturation, it's going to be awesome. This means that you are rendering more than mining, which is amazing. Also, based on average calculation, 8% is enough to go break even in the first period pretty quickly. In the case of Gigawatt, for instance, it was 1 year running at 8%, so it was really small to have the return on investment from everything. So that's how powerful is rendering. So somewhere between 8% and 45-50% of saturation, based on a facility of 100 GPUs, 1060. So that's.
And I apologize for the interruption. I have to disclose that I am preparing a group buy in conjunction with Minority, which is a competitor to Gigawatt. So, sorry.
No, I mean it's a partnership. The moment we have 100 different infrastructure.
For journalistic integrity, I have to disclose that while we're discussing Gigawatt and you working with Gigawatt, so that it doesn't seem like there's a conflict. I
gave a lot of time Gigawatt because it was our first partner and they offered us a lot in terms of testing, free testing on their machines. And then now we just closed a couple of other deals in China, which is 4 times bigger than Gigawatt. And this guy, it's called XBlock. I can disclose, no problem.
Cool. So we all have friends that have really big farms, is what we're saying.
We're all friends, guys. Just why not? We're doing crazy things. We are a small group of crazy guys, so all around the world, all the miners, and we have to use this number to understand. You have to make some guessings and try to make this guessing as accurate as possible, and that's what we imagine to be the usage of the rendering. Now we hope to be surprised and have more than 50% of saturation out of 100 GPUs. Of course, we hope this to happen, but that's the projection of the first year of Leonardo.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I can also jump in a little bit. So
please
besides,
do. Though I've got to say, you don't have a beard yet. I'm disappointed. I kid.
Yeah. So besides income per miner, we did some estimations of the total market. It's really hard because it's really distributed around the world, and there are not much reliable data. But what we can see from our research is that the render market, by the very conservative estimations, is $3 to $4 billion right now. So it's actually more than all Ethereum miners earned in 2017, and they had huge profits. So it's
and there's no luck involved in rendering. A render job is a render job is a render job. There is no there's no mining pool luck involved.
Yeah, and your price is in dollars, not in others, and it doesn't depend on the network difficulty. So you get your 0.25 always, no matter what. And what we actually believe we can do, probably returning to the example of Uber. I guess that many people don't like it. But
no, I just joke because I've done consulting for tech startups before who've gone through the application for Y Combinator and Techstars and all the rest, and so it's just a it's a tech startup joke. But you're right. Actually, it's an apt description for this field.
Yeah. So, but one cool thing that Uber did is when it made the taxi drives more available, probably the price of their taxi drive in California decreased 2 or 3 times, but the total market grown 5 times. So, and what we hope we can achieve is just dramatically increase the market, just making it more affordable for everyone. So more people who now spend hours or days waiting some stuff to render on their own computers, they can just use our network to do the same much faster and paying a little bit for the servers. So, and we believe there is a huge opportunity. And if we try to measure the overall pie, the global market in the world, it will be enough for everybody, even for the current millions of GPUs that are mining. But we perfectly understand that we won't get like 100% market share, or probably 50% market share, like in years, probably never. But we still believe that it will be like more than enough to to get enough income for everyone in the network.
Okay, phenomenal. Well, here's the thing, though. Like what you said, if the total size of the market, the total addressable market is larger than the total addressable market from within Ethereum, so you don't need 100% for it to be potentially profitable for people in this audience, for sure. And I can appreciate that. Hopefully, audience guys, if you haven't smashed the like button, if you haven't hit subscribe, if you haven't checked out the Leonardo Render project page, let me quickly do a screen share so you can see where it is. You can see what it is right here, leonardorender.com. It's, as you would expect, it's not a .io. Sorry, even though they are a tech startup.
I know you don't like polys, low poly on the background, so we avoided it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Particle.js. I'm sorry, there's nothing floating around to play with.
No. I mean, the cube moves a little bit, but just because, it's fun. But the first line in the brief was no molecules, no particles, no things moving around.
Oh, that's great.
I love them, right? No problem with website, they have it, but I want something really clean.
Oh, very cool. And so I don't want to take up your entire day, because I know, because like you said, there's everyone's at a different phase of their day right now. Briefly, for everybody in the audience, if you haven't already gone to leonardorender.com to check them out there, I'll go ahead and put that in the comments so you can click through and have a look-see, take a look at the team. You actually met the majority of the top line here because Taylor walked by. And Marcin is in the chat, but that's what he looks like. And then we didn't hear from Adrian or Delon.
Delon, yes. Delon. Actually, Adrian is here in the New York office.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool.
And Delon is in Los Angeles. Just to give a little bit of geography to the team.
That makes sense also. I mean, especially with distributed render, you would have to have somebody on the ground in LA. Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. And then all the other products and everything else is right here. Oh, hey, very cool. So yeah, V-Ray, Cubic. And then you mentioned before, of course, Cycles for Blender, because that's low-hanging fruit.
So Cubic is the name of, because sometimes can be a little bit confusing. We try to be as clear as possible. So Leonardo Render is Daddy. And then the first product that we released is Cubic, which is the application that you can use for Blender. And actually, Cubic is the Leonardo Render application. It's powered by Leonardo Render, and you can download it right now from this website, from Mac and PC, and make renderings with Blender. The only thing is you have to ask to info@leonardorender.com the account, user and password. But that's the only thing. We will give it right away, and you have like 30 GPUs for free for, it depends, 3-4 hours. It depends how much time you need, and we make sure that you have all the 30 GPUs available for you in that span of time.
Okay, phenomenal. Okay, guys, this is the home page for the project. Where's the best place for community members to reach out to you to ask further questions? We're hitting the literal 2-hour mark of being on camera, and I can't in good conscience ask you to stay on any longer than that. We've taken so much of your time. But if people want to reach out to you individually to ask questions about anything regarding the project or Leonardo Render project, where should they do that?
Can I pass the line to Taylor, because she is so good in managing the community, and we also have Nick that is managing the community. But Taylor, why did you introduce yourself to the community? They want to know where to find all the information, but more or less, it's what I want is what is the headphones? You want to use this one? No. Here we go. I'm coming.
All right, boys. Yeah, guys, Taylor's coming on camera. Boys, calm down. You got a bunch of minors in the audience who are like, we never talk to girls. So sorry in advance. I'll apologize.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
You're gonna get a lot of hellos in the comments right now.
I'm also the voice behind the tutorial, so.
Great. So we were just asking, because we just spent 2 hours with a bit of the team, just asking when members of the community who are predominantly GPU miners, when they want to ask more questions about the Leonardo Render project, whether it's the blockchain side, tokens, reputation management moving forward, rating systems, payouts, different software packages that are going to be released soon, or just the beta, where should they reach out to you?
So our Telegram is probably the best place to reach us. The entire team is on there. You can also email us at info@leonardorender.com. I definitely say that the info email makes it so we can't miss it. We've got a number of people that check it regularly. We try to respond as quickly as possible, but we also don't have an automated response. So sometimes it does take a minute. Sometimes, we can't be everywhere at once. So if you don't get a response quick enough on the Telegram channel, then hit us up on info. If you don't hear from us within a day or two, hit us up again. Like, it's not going to hurt anybody. If anything, you might just get a shorter response. But we try to get back to people as quickly as possible and as informatively as possible.
Okay, phenomenal. And now I've had 2 more questions, and I'm sorry that Marco hopped off the camera, but Taylor, you're on camera, so you're the gal. Okay, so you're in the hot seat.
I can answer.
Okay, well, these are important questions. So, and if you want to call Marco in as a lifeline, totally understood. But one question is, 5 to 10 years from now, come hell or high water, right? You guys have already been going for 2 years strong, and the project has got great momentum and traction. And here we are talking to you about it. We can't wait to use it. 5 years from now, with tech startups, anything can happen. Worst case scenario, EMP hits and everything related to Leonardo Render is like demagnetized, erased, like destroyed. What do you want people to remember from the Leonardo Render project, team, or the effort that you put into it?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to answer on a really basic level on that one. What I want people to remember is that we had a product that was working. In the middle of our ICO, where we're in our private sale right now, and we already have a working product, which is unlike many ICOs out there. So I think that's huge. We've also tried to get a team that really encompasses every part of this project. Whether you're on the creative side, you're on the tech side, we've tried to really make sure that our team is well-rounded and has the background to kind of push this forward in the best way possible. So hopefully everybody can remember really mainly the product. It's a great product from the beginning. When I first signed on, I was like, make me a believer, and that was really the sellers. I made Marco make me a believer, and it worked. I didn't know much about the blockchain world, to be entirely honest. I come from a creative background, and I wanted him to prove it to me. I wanted him to prove that the product works, and it does. I've used it myself.
Phenomenal.
Obviously. I would be sad if I haven't used it, but
we've evaluated projects where that's absolutely the case. So, like, in theory, it should work. Hold on, we're gonna go test net in like 3 months. So just wait. Yeah, but that's awesome. So, and then this is the last question, the most important question, very serious question. When are you guys gonna pay me that $25,000 you promised for this interview?
Listen, you don't accept any kind of payment. I know that.
Awesome. Guys, round of applause for Taylor, because she totally got it, right? And that's just it. This is my shameless plug, right, for the show, is that as you know, thank goodness the reputation precedes. As you know, I don't accept bounties. I can't accept bounties because the community would know that interviews aren't legit. And it would limit my ability to ask tough questions or allow the audience to ask the really tough questions. And like you said, give these projects the best shot at making them a believer by answering tough questions. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Seth. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, audience, anything else for Taylor before I take her off of the large screen? Because everyone's like, a girl.
You're really putting me on the hot seat here, Seth.
I know. It's so tough because I come from a creative background. You probably gleaned from some of the interviews. And I'm like, yeah, right. Got it. Like half the population is female. Guys, get over it. But in the mining community, it's like so rare. It's such an oddity. I don't know why. It's like, so Christy and I do our Monday show and they're like, oh, girl.
Hopefully we're going to change that. Coming from the production world, it's predominantly a male field, and over the last few years, it changed significantly. And then I go to another field that's also predominantly male. But we're changing that. We will be taking over. Sorry, guys, it's happening.
Well, I will allow for about 50% takeover. How about that? Fair?
That's fine. I can.
So, and I'll be right there alongside you to make sure that it's 50%. We're good. But you got your work cut out for you, Taylor. I'm glad that you're here with the team.
I like that. I like a challenge.
Awesome. So, hey, on that note, then we're just going to say thanks for the time. We took so much of that. Marcin, like when we started the live stream, I don't know if his back was hurting or whatever. He's like, I'm going to be off camera. Thanks. But taking so much of the time, really appreciate it. And we'll be reaching out to you, I'm sure, on Telegram and then at that email that you mentioned before. So really appreciate the time.
And vote LeonardoRender.com. Sorry, shameless plug. I have to.
Yeah, totally. And Roderick also, for the record, says, not a girl, a woman.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Roderick. I appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Thank you so much, Seth.
Yep. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.